Hello, and welcome to my channel. My name is Jonathan Cohn, and today I have a book review of the book Ill Wind by Kevin J. Anderson and Doug Beason. This is a standalone apocalyptic novel with some sci-fi elements to it. As longtime viewers know, I'm a big Kevin Anderson fan. I've read a lot of his works, although nowhere near all of his works. Boy, is he proficient. I've read most of his Star Wars works. I've read his 3 adult novels in the trilogy that he wrote, plus Darksaber, plus I've read his almost all of his middle grade books that he wrote with Rebecca Mesta. I've also read his Wake of the Dragon fantasy trilogy, which is my favorite of his books, and truly some amazing stuff there. And I've read his Saga of the Seven Sons, which is his big epic sci-fi series. But I've never read a standalone book from him. I've never read an apocalyptic book from him, and I've never read a collaboration outside of his wife by him. So this is the first of his collaborations with Doug Beason, and I'm very excited to discuss it and excited to read more by both of them. So the first thing is, this is a very simple premise. What if a natural disaster, a big oil spill happened, and in our haste to fix up the spill, we inadvertently cause an even bigger problem, which causes us to lose all of the world's oil and plastic, like that. And this is a very simple premise. It's what would happen to the world if that happened. And you follow a lot of different characters in this book, and you see from different perspectives how this would cause an apocalypse. And overall, it's very well executed. This book has a big dramatis personae at the beginning of it, and I think it would be really daunting to a lot of people. Don't be daunted by the dramatis personae in this book, because a lot of the characters he mentioned literally just are one-off, mentioned in a chapter, show up briefly, and then never show up again. A few of the characters are literally dead before the book even starts, and they're just referenced by the spouse and father of these characters in his first chapter. So it's not like the dramatis personae is all the point of view characters like it is for some of Kevin's other series, like the big Saga of the Seven Sons, which had huge casts of characters. Now, this is actually quite smaller than it leads you to believe in the beginning, but it's still quite a large cast than other authors would have. But it is, you can tell this is a Kevin Anderson book when you're reading it, because it just feels like it. The chapter lengths, the way that the chapters flow and intercut between each other. I think Kevin Anderson's one of the few masters of telling huge epic stories and intercutting between characters in those stories. And despite the fact that all of these characters have various plot lines, this one's over here, this one's over here, this one's over here, this one's over here, he brings them all together really well in this book. One of his best, and since it's a standalone, he has to bring it all together at the end. But there's one character that it doesn't match properly, that doesn't have the right plot line. This character could have been integrated properly, and he just doesn't. And it's because I think Kevin Anderson wanted to do more in the future, and he just couldn't. The big problem character is Speaker of the House, Mayo, or Morrow, or however you say his name. This character, the Speaker of the House, has some circumstances that are unfortunate for him and for the world that put him in a leadership position in the country. And he has just some despicable tendencies, and it's very easy to hate this character because of the things he does to his family and the things he does to the world. And he was set up to be like a more overarching villain. There's like a general in this that's the main villain, and then a little guy who causes the oil spill, who's the little villain. They're the two primary villains point of view wise. Mayo just has kind of he's the leader, the political leader perspective. And the political perspective is interesting, but because it's so disconnected with what's happening, because he's out east, Mayo is out in the East Coast for most of the book, whereas all the rest of the cast is on the West Coast, either in California or New Mexico or Nevada. They're all over on the West Coast. And so it just felt so disconnected, and it felt like that was like the odd man out. And it was like kind of like, it's almost like if you had a movie and he just wrote that part because he had a friend that wanted the part. That's what it felt like. It felt like it was an unnecessary part that should have been either cut or revised. Had the president had more an active role and actually had this guy actually come, had Mayo come to the main events of the book in the West, maybe it would have worked, but because he's so disconnected, it didn't work really well. That's my biggest problem with the book. My second biggest problem is that this book is a standalone, and it's very much written to be a standalone, but Anderson and Beason couldn't help themselves and write hooks for the future, write hooks for potential future books. And I really think they shouldn't have done that. They should have just left it alone as a standalone. They never did go back and write more books, so it was pointless anyway. But they shouldn't have done it, regardless of whether they could have written more ideas, because this book works as a standalone, and they just cut it off at the knees by making the ending smaller than it should have been. Because of this, you could say this is more character based than plot based, ironically, because that's something I've never said about Kevin Anderson. But it should have been more plot based because they're making like implicit promises at the beginning of the book, like this needs to happen at the end of the book, and it does, but it's like, oh well, that'll happen eventually, but we don't need to get there right now. And it's like, no, that's the climax of the book should be us seeing this happen. It's really hard to not spoil that, but I was very frustrated by that. But take away those two things, the one unnecessary minor plot line and the fact that he kneecapped his ending, I think this is a delightful book through and through the rest of it. And then that just about everything else works. All the characters work, all of the themes work, and all of the plot works really well. Action works really well here, and I think the way that all the characters come together at the end really works well for it. Talking about some of the characters, there's one character, Todd, I believe it's pronounced Severin, and he is, to me, the protagonist of the novel. If you had to peg one person as the protagonist, and he has this rugged cowboy, do the right thing. He has a very honorable mentality. He has a very respectful tone, and I really liked reading him as a character. And I also really liked the way that Anderson dealt with promiscuity in this book, because there are a couple of couples and characters in this book who are really promiscuous and really just not handling relationships the right way. And because of that, there are big consequences for these people, these characters in the book. Whereas you take Todd, who has an opportunity to have a promiscuous relationship, and he decides not to do it, to remain honorable and to remain celibate, and it becomes much more engaging, and he becomes that traditional male hero that I really respect and really enjoy in my novels. And I liked that he represented those kind of values of waiting for marriage type thing, and also being the hero of I've got to go do the good deed because it's the right thing to do. I did like that he had that element to him. And then there were other characters that really worked well. I thought Heather was a very engaging character. I thought that Iris was very engaging. I thought that I thought Spencer Lockwood was hilarious. I thought that the whole military versus the civilian stuff was really good. And then, of course, this book deals with some environmental themes. And I think a lot of people might be turned off on the book, fearing that they will be offended or not happy with the outcome of the book. And I think that there are people who could be offended by the book, but I really don't think you should use that as your excuse, because I think that Anderson and Beason cleverly hit multiple sides. It's not just the oil industry that's hit, but also the extreme left of the hippies that are hit in this book. And so obviously the oil spill, and also the problem of when the oil is all goes away like that and the plastic goes away, it shows our reliance on those things, on oil and plastic. And it shows we shouldn't be so reliant on them. And also, there's a thing about solar farming here, and he's propping up solar farming as this is the alternative we should go with, not this other stuff, not this oil and plastics. So he is hitting the oil industry hard in this book. And he also hits people who profit off of that, politicians who profit off of that, and things like that really hard. But it's not exclusive. He also hits the environmentalists. And where he hits in the environmentalists is the slow burn aspect of the novel, where you realize if we just move to renewable like that, and we just cut off fossil fuels like some extremists are saying, that would cause detrimental damage, not only to the economy, but potentially to the ecology and also to the way society is run. The best way to make effective changes is to do a little bit at a time over a long period of time. And there have been some really effective people at doing that. And then sometimes when you try to do a big change quickly, it either can go really well or more often can be horrible. And that's kind of what happens here. So, and also some of the hippies are just useless in this book. And it's like, come on, do something, characters. So actually, it's really interesting how everybody gets hit. And so I think that because of that, it's kind of like listening to a comedian who's just going to insult everyone. That's how it is with the environmental themes in this book. You're going to enjoy it. There might be moments where you're like, I don't agree with you here. Or you might go, I think you went too far. But you're just like, everybody's gotten hit, so what does it matter? I also think that this book is quite well paced. It's about 500 pages, which some of Anderson's books are either super short or some of them are about this length. And I think that works quite well for the book. It could have been a little bit shorter, could have cut out the whole Mayo character, and that would have cut up maybe 50 pages, maybe 75 pages, and that would have been enough to make this not a tome, but it's still highly enjoyable. And I really do think that this is a unique step forward for them. This is classified by Tor as science fiction, and I get why they call it science fiction, but it really is more of an apocalyptic novel. It really is more of like a thriller almost, because all of the things that happen in this book are plausible. Like just about all the technology involved, all of the character developments, almost everything that happens is plausible in this book, except one little element that's really tiny. And so I think this is more of a thriller to me. But it's highly enjoyable. It's a standalone. It proves Anderson and Beason can write whatever. Like, Anderson can write whatever genre he needs to. He's gonna nail it, or at least do really well. There's very few of his books that are, like, amazing, but I think there's very few of his books that are bad. I think that he does either good or great. Generally, he usually gets, if we're doing out of 5 stars, usually he hits 3 or 4 stars. Occasionally he gets up to 5, and very occasionally I might give him a 2 star. But like almost the majority of the books, high majority of the books I've read by him are 3 to 4 star, and so I feel confident continuing to read his books. One, because I enjoy the style, but also because I know I'm probably going to get a good read out of this. And if not, there's so many other books that he's written. Like, I've read maybe 25, 30 of his books, yet he's written like 170 now and still writing. So I have a long way to go in my Kevin Anderson fandom. And Doug Beason, to be fair, I can't just talk about Kevin Anderson because Doug Beason co-wrote this book and he did a great job with Anderson. Their style, it felt like Anderson's style, but it still worked. And I'm interested in, Beason he does a few kind of light sci-fi books with Anderson, but Beason also has some more thriller books with Anderson. I'd be interested in reading more of their collabs. Certainly, I think it'll be enjoyable. And it sets me up for reading another Anderson collab that I'm going to read next year, which is his collaboration with Brian Herbert. So I quite enjoyed this book. It's not a favorite of mine. It's not the best book I read this year. It's not even the best apocalyptic book I read this year. That goes to Extreme Makeover. But it's still quite enjoyable and lots of fun. So if you've read this book, what are your thoughts? Did you really enjoy it? Did you hate it? I'd be interested in hearing it. Also, if you've read this, if you've read Kevin Anderson, what do you think of him as an author? Leave me all those thoughts in the comments section down below. And until next time, I'm Jonathan, and thank you for watching.